Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third podcast in our podcast series. Today we have Sivadas Ramdas, Director of Engineering of NJC Labs, with us. Hello, Shiva.
Hi,
Welcome.
Bejoy.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. And how was your Christmas break?
Yeah, it was awesome.
And
Yeah.
Happy New Year, by the way.
Yeah, thanks. And Happy New Year to you too, right? And I think this is the first podcast of the year.
Yes, let's see how this goes.
Yeah,
we'll
sure,
try.
sure. Yep,
We'll
yep,
try to
yep.
make it as interesting as possible for the audience.
Yeah,
Right.
like we will make the platform part amazing for everyone. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's what we should be looking to achieve from today's podcast, right?
Yeah.
We have been doing a lot of advanced platform setups for a lot of customers across the world.
Yes.
And I thought it's better to share our experience so that customers, MuleSoft customers across the world can make use of those experience,
Mm-hmm.
whatever we have learned, right? So that's the idea.
Yep.
And one other reason is we won the Partner Innovation Award globally for MuleSoft this year
Yes.
from Salesforce,
Yep.
and that award was because of an RTF installation in an OpenShift cluster. Right. So let's
Mhm.
start with that experience. So how was your experience in setting up that? That was our first
Yes.
complex OpenShift installation, right? So yeah.
Complex as well as like the time to market requirement as well was.
It was not very
high.
complex for us because we had a accelerator,
Yeah.
but yeah. So let
Yes,
us share.
so someone like who's not familiar with like the kind of thing that we are doing, right? So, it is complex for them, right? So, but it is actually simple, right? If you do things in the right way, if you do the preparations in the right way, it's a seamless transition. Now, for this customer, right, it was a migration requirement from the RTF appliance version, 1.x version, to BYOK 2.0. And the specific requirement, like they wanted to be as much as close to their existing data center architecture. They were hosting all their integration in their own data center. So the de facto option they had at that point of time was only OpenShift at that point of time that was supported. We didn't had at that point like any other bare metal installation option, right? So all these ranchers and you know rancher option
EKS anywhere.
EKS anywhere, they came like very late, right? But when we were there, like at that point, like this was the only option the customer was having, and we had to make it work, right? So we had to perform RTF installation on top of OpenShift, right? We had to set up the OpenShift cluster, and because this was one of the first migrations that happened in the MuleSoft space, specifically to OpenShift, we had to come with a clear architecture because it was an untested waters, right? So we had to innovate a lot to get the right architecture, and once we had the right architecture in place, baseline, like that is the baseline architecture for in this case was getting the OpenShift architecture right. Once that was in place, like then the runtime fabric installation was very easy, right? So the operators were available. We were able to spin up RTF cluster, and thankfully we already had the automation and everything set up already for the build and release pipelines for the Mule applications. It was mere redirection for us, to point and shoot like the APIs that were running on appliance versions to straight over like a 2.0. Now it's a major migration, like when you look at the versions, the underlying infrastructure, but that's where like the MuleSoft as a product, right? So you build it for a particular version of Mule runtime, it will run anywhere, right? So
Yeah.
you put that point also. And
Yeah, I
we were able
remember.
to do that in a very short period of time.
And I
yeah.
remember that cutover was very smooth, right?
Yeah.
The business didn't even face
Yeah.
any challenges in this complete change of infrastructure,
Yeah.
right? That was amazing. And one thing, one concern during that process, which happened right in this OpenShift migration, was mainly around this additional processing, like additional containers, which OpenShift spins up for
Mhm.
its own processing when we install OpenShift and RTF on top of OpenShift.
Mm-hmm.
And how did we mitigate that? I think I remember a infrastructure node option
Mhm.
is there. So yeah, so if you could share that
Yes,
experience.
so a couple of things there. So it's not just like so earlier, like the RTF services were running in the controller nodes as well, right? In the BYOKs, not BYOKs, like the earlier appliance versions, RTF services were running in the controller nodes. Now, when the BYOKs versions, like what is happening right now, like the RTF services also, right? So it also runs in the control in the worker nodes. Okay, apart from OpenShift services also, right? Ingress services, for example. So there are multiple services that will be coming up. So we have to plan for additional capacity within those nodes. But yes, there is a trick here now, right? Okay, so when you're working with the MuleSoft license, it has to be always compliant, right, on that front. So either you have to cap it, like the maximum number of nodes that you are going to use with the maximum number of CPUs that you're going to use. It should be aligned with the license, or you have to control the bursting of each and every. So you have to cap the bursting of each and every API, so that the sum of all the CPUs, it's like within the limits of the core subscription the customer is having, right? So we experiment with both the ways, right? For this particular customer, CPU capping was the bursting cap was the best option. But in some other customer scenarios, we are seeing like, okay, we don't have to cap it, like let it burst. Okay, but that gives you more flexibility, right? You like for some applications which need like huge computation and random period of time, it helps them in certain ways. So it totally depends on the workload. But for this customer, it was capping that worked best for them. Yeah.
Yeah. And when we apply capping at a application level, right? So one thing which I have noticed is when the application gets restarted, and if the cap is less, let's say if you put
Mm-hmm.
only 0.1 week core for each application, and
It'll
if
take a lot of time.
application, yeah, when it restarts, it takes bit more time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I remember our team was allocating more CPU for each application,
Mm-hmm.
and the licensing, if we do at the worker node, then maybe we can save or we can make the application restart faster.
Mm-hmm.
It all depends on the business,
Yeah.
like how they want,
Mm-hmm.
how available this application needs to be, etc.
Yeah. So now for this, it was also possible to do something like this in some customer locations. We had done that, in fact. So bursting the cap like 30 odd applications running on a 2 node cluster. So we have to make like maximum codes available in this kind of scenarios, right? So either we have to increase the number of nodes for your high availability. So normally we configure clusters in 3 node configuration, but when it comes to this scenario, right? Okay, I want to make use of the maximum number of CPU available or computation available at that node. So instead of increasing the number of worker nodes, we reduce the number of worker nodes, right? So from 3 we reduce to 2, but at the same time we pack in more cores into each node. So it will be like which was like earlier it was a 4 vCPU machine, now it will be like a 6 vCPU or 8 vCPU machine. So we like in one way we are concentrating all the firepower in 1 or 2 workers, so which and also increasing the API density. But at the same time, like there is sufficient capacity available when the bursting happens. There is sufficient cores available also, to take up that load. Now these kind of things, like I won't recommend like without doing an analysis, proper analysis. Don't do it, right? So you have to know exactly what you're doing. We did a lot of analysis. We knew exactly what the bursting of each APIs would be, what is the peak workload, what is the working range. We had all the data with it. We also had the historic data on these APIs from the last 4 years as well. So we know exactly where we are going, right? So we were able to do those kind of things in these kind of scenarios. But yes, simply going and configuring those things, you won't get the desired result. Yeah.
Right, and you mentioned earlier about RTF services, which gets
Mm-hmm.
initially it was in the controller nodes, and now it's in the worker nodes,
Mm-hmm.
and we can OpenShift now gives the option of infrastructure node, and we can move some of this to infrastructure node,
Mm-hmm.
right? And how significant is that the percentage of CPU which gets moved into infrastructure node?
It's
Is it-
very
it's not
meager, very less. Yeah.
very less. Okay.
Mostly we do that for compliance requirements. Okay, so
Right.
and
Okay.
that's not the RTF workloads we move, like mostly the ingress workloads, right? So
Mhm.
ingress controller also ingress workloads also run either in the worker controller nodes. So normally we have to keep that controller nodes out of the regular network into a separate management network. Therefore, like ingress nodes has to go into some other place. Right? So
Okay.
those kind of scenarios.
Mainly from a security standpoint.
Security
That's
standpoint,
not
yeah.
from a CPU perspective,
No,
right?
no,
It's
right.
okay. That's good.
OpenShift ingress is really good. Like OpenShift ingress routes HA proxies. Right? So it's really lightweight compared to Nginx. Its
Yeah.
performance is also very good. So it doesn't consume so much like
Okay.
CPUs or things like that. Yeah.
So now we, having worked with multiple customers in different regions, right?
Mhm.
Do you now see a trend of customers using a hybrid kind of a infrastructure option, like some in cloud, some in on-prem? Is that a trend? And are
Mhm.
we seeing more of an RTF installation recently, or is it mainly based on our customer base? What is your
Okay.
experience on
So
that?
one thing that we are seeing across the world is cloud is really going expensive for customers, right? Especially when it comes to working with large integration workloads, right? Um, and like customers prefers to have you know some control on these costs, right? So what we're seeing is like customers are maintaining infrastructure both in cloud and on-prem, and we are seeing like that large workloads moving into data centers nowadays rather than in cloud. Because one, for obvious reason, like the edge services which they want to expose to the public services, which is like really lightweight and need high availability and all those things, right? So it's easier to maintain in cloud, it's cheaper. But at the same time, when this complex integrations that is happening and the core systems are sitting in the data center in the on-prem, rather than running those workloads in the cloud, customers prefer to have them in on-prem, right? For example, like customers with mainframes in the backend, for example, or large ERP systems, right? So which are hosted in on-premise with terabytes of data and petabytes of data, right? So those customers prefer to have those integrations move close to their data center. At the same time, they want the same benefits of the cloud as well. So what the trend that we are seeing is like customers are, you know, making a combination of both, best of both world, um, f- and at the same time, it's not just completely cloud up all the time, right? So earlier days, like it was always cloud up and cloud up 1.0. Now, like customers are starting with cloud up 1.0, 2.0 as a starting point, with one core or
Mm.
two core to get the first couple of APIs in. And the next stepping stone for them is like going advanced. And when they go advanced, like it is going to be RTF all the time, and Runtime Fabric on your bring your own Kubernetes cluster. So even like customers, like earlier we never used to recommend customers who don't had like expertise in containerization. You know, like we normally don't recommend like RTF initially, but nowadays like we're seeing that trend also. Customers are willing to take that risk and initially itself like go into Runtime Fabric phase as well. And yes, so we have multiple go lives right in that platform, successful go lives last year alone. Um, yeah, but that's the trend now.
Yeah.
Hybrid, like a part is workload is going in the cloud, a part workload is in hybrid environments, and that too in OpenShift clusters. So not the traditional hybrid like a cluster or server group, pure play RTF.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Excellent. So, and that reminds me of another customer, right?
Mm-hmm.
The recent financial service customer based in Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
The project which was done where we effectively utilize or rather optimize the infrastructure to have multiple environments being run in same cluster with different namespaces.
Oh, so you're talking about the customer with 20 RTF clusters, right? Okay. This one we had to really like, work hard because the licensing cost was going through the roof, right? And it was pure redundancy. They didn't need that level of redundancy, right? The only level of redundancy they needed was in the production environments, right? Because of their organization
Of
structure.
course, yeah, production,
Yeah.
ideally it's better to reduce the risk and keep it separate even if
Yeah.
it's redundant. Yeah.
But for
So
the non-production environments, you
makes
don't need to
sense.
have that kind of things. So yeah, we were able to do that, and it's not just RTF running on those workloads, right? So this is like OpenShift clusters, and there are different namespaces, and in a couple of namespaces we have a MuleSoft applications running, and there are non-Mule applications also running in the same cluster. Okay,
Yeah.
so in different namespaces. So earlier, right? So when we were in the appliance model, we used to dedicate RTF Kubernetes clusters, right? So for
Only for
only
MuleSoft.
for Mule. That trend has changed right now. So now Mule can coexist in other namespaces, right? In a Kubernetes cluster.
Okay, that's from a microservice architecture perspective. So all different types of microservice,
Mm-hmm.
irrespective of which technology they are, right? Either
Yeah.
Mule, non-Mule, all microservices stay in this cluster, same cluster,
Yeah.
in different namespaces, and you can bring a universal API management layer on
Yes,
top of
we are
it.
also using Flex gateways in
Like,
this customers
yeah,
right here for
absolutely.
managing non-Mule APIs.
Absolutely. So I think from a enterprise architecture perspective, that makes absolute sense. Yeah.
Yeah, API management, observability. This is like it's a part of the architecture, so you don't have to explicitly go and implement anything separately for these kind of things. Plus you have a coherent system, right? So earlier, like, you had to maintain like 5 different types of systems just for your microservice. Now you have just one base platform, which is, OpenShift in this case, and every microservices and API management runs there fine, right? So we have the Mule applications doing the heavy lifting of all the integration use case scenarios, and this one is like mostly open banking. So
Okay.
like following up in all the compliance requirements and everything that comes along with it, and also non-Mule services like enterprise Java applications, right? Spring Boot applications running in different namespaces, both managed, like with Flex gateways and Mule. Yeah.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe one last question on this, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
maybe one aspect of a customer which reminds me, like that customer has got 34 environments altogether.
Mm-hmm.
So for that customer, and it's all separate environment, separate infrastructure, and now I think we need to talk to them to let them know that MuleSoft RTF
We can
provides this
reduce. Yeah.
capability of having different namespaces in the same cluster, so that
Mm-hmm.
their infrastructure can be optimized, right?
Yeah.
So
So, and these infrastructure is like not, like when we say when we are reducing the infrastructure, we are reducing the IT overhead, right? So maintenance overhead. But the platform we are putting in is also scalable. It's future proof. You can keep on adding the worker nodes whenever you need it. You can keep on increasing the CPU. You can increase the RAM. So it's not like fixed that you set this up now and it's always capped forever. No, these are all scalable on-premise capability, right? So Mule also scales on-premise.
right.
So along with like the base platform that was using like either it is EKS Anywhere or we are using OpenShift, these are also scalable infrastructure when it comes to customer hosted environments, right? Yeah.
Nice. And then finally, the current project which we are doing for banking customer in Africa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's a. Are we doing anything in specifically in
Yeah,
RTF for PCA?
we got in the middle of war zone. Like for example, like you're already familiar with like the recent acquisition of VMware, right, by Broadcom, right, and it changed the entire dynamics of VMware. So a lot of customers who were previously happy with VMware, ESXi, and vSphere platforms, right? They are looking for alternative hypervisor platforms, right? So, for this customer, like when the project started, it was on VMware, but when it is going into production, it is on Nutanix, right? So,
Right.
so there is some challenge, but at the end of the day, like it's hypervisors and Mule like work the same way, whether it is in cloud or on-prem, right? So we have that advantage. We have to work around certain challenges, especially disconnected installation environments. It's a little bit complex compared to how we do with EXXi earlier, but still, it's Nutanix is still like a very easy to use platform. Um, and RTF like OpenShift works well on Nutanix, and on top of OpenShift, like MuleSoft, Runtime
Mule.
Fabric runs seamlessly, so it's not a
Yeah.
challenge.
So we didn't have to do anything for PCI compliance in particular, right? Did you do anything or the?
Yeah, we had to demarcate a separate cluster
Mm,
for the PCI compliance requirement, along with the ingress and the egress. Okay, along
right.
with that, certification walls and some things that
Okay.
comes along with the requirements.
Right.
Yeah.
We had to fight hard with our security team to get it resolved. Yeah.
Yeah, we had to. We had to extensively work with them on this kind of things. But that's also where like the flexibility of MuleSoft comes in, right? So one requirement was like every API should have a CA issued certificate. So normally, like in new places where we do, like we go with self-signed certificates. In this particular case, like every API that is running in the PCI DSS environment, it is having a
So you
CSU
have a
certificate.
double layer of security. So you have one at the load balancer, and then every API level, you will have a separate.
No, there are
C.
multiple layers of security. There is an edge WAF. Okay, so then there is a load balancer level security. Then within the RTF application level itself, like there's a network security layer. There's a firewall like in the
So
OpenShift, and
okay,
then like within the Mule applications, we have the policies also put in place.
right. Okay. So the last mile is at the application, and that's where you need CA.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. That's not self-signed.
no self-signed certificates in the PCI DSS server.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Mhm.
Right. So I think we covered pretty much all different scenarios of RTF.
No, something we didn't cover, like which is actually making a lot of noise right now, like not noise, like widespread adoption. That is the Flex Gateway, right? So Flex Gateway which is going to be the lightweight, de facto kind of norm now for customers who have just API management requirement, and we are seeing like great adoption of Flex Gateway.
Right.
Especially in areas where customers already have hundreds of microservices, and it is becoming a pain point for them to manage those APIs. Right.
Okay. Right. So let's
Mhm.
summarize this conversation for now. I think it's been discussing various RTF setups.
Mhm.
So Cloud Hub, both 1 and 2, we know that it's iPaaS. It's easy to configure and set up. Hardly
Yeah.
takes some time. But then our experience, I think nowadays it's more into RTF rather than Cloud Hub. No, it's
So
a
cloud of anybody can
piece
do,
of
right?
cake.
So
Cake for us.
anyone with minimum amount of training, right? So they can like take our trainings. Like we are also one of the largest training partners, right? Of MuleSoft, you know
Yeah.
that. With the base level of training, like anybody can implement in Cloud of 1.0, 2.0. But when it comes to this advanced engineering things, right? So that's where our niche is also, and we were specializing in these kind of activities from the beginning, right? So hybrid environments and RTF environments, these were our forte, right? And still our forte, right? Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So let's see this year, 2025, we can help serve our customers more in the platform setup. And if there are challenges from any of the customer in RTF or any infrastructure or platform related
Yep.
scenarios, yes, we are here to help.
Mhm.
And thank you, Shiva, for your time.
Thank you,
So
Vijay.
speak later.
Yeah.